How's it going today, guys? It's Jerry Quartz with the first tutorial that I've done on this account. I'm sorry it's taken so long. I've actually never done a tutorial, nor have I ever really been asked to do a tutorial for anything, so I was a little bit overwhelmed at first because I didn't know exactly how I was going to do this. But I guess this way works. I'm recording off my MacBook right now, so I'm just doing a QuickTime record, and I'm also recording with the internal microphone on it, so if the quality isn't the best, I'm sorry. My computer is pretty trash. It's not the worst, but it's by far not the best. But without further ado, I'm going to show you what we're doing today. So we're going to take this iPhoto here, and after I add on all the effects, we're going to turn it into this. Now it doesn't look like much now, but when I bring it into Lightroom, it looks a little bit better. So that will be the end product that will happen. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go in depth into the Lightroom tutorial because I feel like that would take.
Oh my fucking god, she fucking dead.
We're going to begin this. First of all, we don't need one of these, but we'll figure that out as we go. So, working backwards, that's what the process looks like. So, I'm not going to redo the whole image because, to be honest, I just tried doing that with a different image and it looked terrible. So I'm just going to go step by step on what I did and just go in depth of what I did, and then hopefully that is enough for you to follow along and maybe recreate a similar image but not the exact same image. So first thing I did is both these images are on Unsplash. Chances are you've seen this image of the person with the hands in a lot of foggy landscapes or anything similar to that. It works well with fog. Just so you can see the original image, I will take, I'm just going to bring one above, and I'm just going to take off that layer mask. We're going to delete that and take off multiply. So this is the original photo. Chances are you've seen it. It's on Unsplash. I just hit multiply on it, and then I went around the eye and just made a layer mask on it. To make a layer mask, all you're going to do is you're going to click the image that you want. You're going to select this little guy here, the box with the circle in the middle, and then it's going to create a new box. And that way you're just going to take your brush tool, and if you brush black, it'll erase. If you brush white, it'll bring stuff back. So that's how I got that there. The positioning for the hands, you kind of want to make sure that they're in the eyeball, so it makes it look like it's coming out of the eyeball. As for the head, I kind of erased most of the head and just used the middle of the eye as the head for the shadow. But it's not really crucial to have it. I just thought that it was a cool little tidbit just to have like the middle of the eye as the head and then the two hands popping out from the side. In order to match the shadows a little bit better and to bring out some of the body, I ended up putting a curves adjustment on it, and my curve adjustment just looked like this. Crush the shadows a little bit, or I brought more shadows in. I brought my midtones down and my highlights I crushed up because I didn't want any of the outside border that I originally had before. Moving on, I desaturate. Most of my manipulations, I will always desaturate whatever I'm trying to add in. What this does is it just gets rid of all the color, all the unnecessary colors that you don't really want. And then you can always paint them back in later, the same way that we painted out the stuff in the eye with the hands. So what I did is I ended up desaturating everything, just so I kind of had a clean palette, just to kind of make everything red if I wanted to. So I ended up making a layer mask just with the red, just so I can make the eyeball red. So all I did was I boosted the saturation and brought it to the left a little bit, which made it red. If you want to make it any other color, you can just by moving the saturation now. Just because you have that little part, here I have a little bit more selected than what I would like. So you can just use your layer mask and just go through it yet again. That's looking pretty good to me. So whichever color you want to make it, you can make it. If you want to make it blue, cool. I chose red because red's just like a naturally spooky thing. Moving on, I just use the color balance. So usually after I desaturate everything, I will move on to color balancing, so that will add in the colors that you want. So when you go into color balance, which is located just right here beside your hue and saturation adjustment in Photoshop, so you're able to move it this way if you want to make the image more red. I went for a more cinematic approach to it. So usually cinematic approaches have, or cinematic colors have more greens, very dark blues, more so that aesthetic. If you go down into the tone, this only drop menu here, you can go into shadows. You want to go through every one of these. It's super crucial to, you don't have to do it on everything. As you can see, magenta and green and yellow and blue, I did not even touch in my highlights, but the cyans I did because I wanted to make it a little bit more red in the highlights. What this does is it directly affects the shadows, the highlights, or the midtones however you would like. So if I want my shadows to be insanely blue, I could just crank it to one side. I wouldn't recommend going all the way to one side unless you're going for that effect. Just a little bit does a lot in this case. So that's what I did there. The brightness, I will show you how I do the brightness on most of my photos super quickly because it's easy. So you're gonna bring your brightness down like that, and right now already it's really dark and you probably don't want that. So you're just gonna bring up your brush size to about there. Just so like the corners of it, we're gonna give it a vignetting look. You wanna make sure your brush hardness is at nothing. So you want it to be as subtle as possible. And then you're just gonna click in. So what that does is it keeps the sides dark and it keeps your, the middle or wherever you put your brush brighter. So I'm just gonna follow with the original one that I did. Now in here is the sparks that I added in. So all I did here was I just grabbed sparks off of Google. If you're having also issues trying to find anything and you're just not finding anything on Unsplash, Pexels, all of those sites, you can always go into Google, and if you go into, pretty sure it's tools and usage rights, you can go to reuse with modification and you can find some other things that aren't usually on the sites that you're looking for. You can also find other sites to get stock images off of through that method too. So I found these sparks, they're played perfectly. I ended up linking the hue and saturation layer that I made for it by pressing Alt on Mac and bringing it till I get this box, and I just put it down onto the sparks. What that did is I just brought the saturation up a little bit just to make them more red and pop out a little bit more. And again, if you want to change them to any other color, say you want blue sparks, totally cool, you can do that. I wanted to keep them as natural as possible, so I made them a little bit more red and boosted the saturation just so they didn't get too lost in the image. Now, I did the exact same thing again. I duplicated the exact same group after I was done that, and then I just moved it around a little bit. If you want as well, you can do some blur to it, like Gaussian blur would be perfect right now. Just whatever you like, the sky's the limit. So finally, to add a little bit more mood to the image, I put black borders on it. So all I did was I grabbed a layer, grabbed my brush, made sure that I had black on, and I just went like that. And you have to make sure your hardness isn't maxed out, because if your hardness is maxed out, then you're gonna get something that looks like this. And that's not really subtle at all. So just make sure your hardness is down and you're all good. So that was it for the photo that I did, that I posted recently for a second time. Finishing up, what I would do now is I would just get my text layer and I would just write my tag. I put a tag on all my photos now. There's been a couple of times where people have just straight up stolen my work, mainly just for commission, not like anything through Instagram that I've come across yet. But just put Always, always, always put watermarks on it. It does not make your image look ugly if you put the opacity down. Like right now you can't see mine unless you absolutely zoom in, and then it's right there. I cannot stress that enough. Always put watermarks on your image. Don't make them crazy, just make them subtle. Just so they're there and you have a better peace of mind. So after this, I just saved it. I save it like everybody else. I just save it as JPEG. I know there's some people that save in TIFF. I tried saving in TIFF. I tried to start doing that. It just wasn't for me. I might try again because it seems like a little bit more professional approach of keeping all of your stuff sharp and color corrected and all that. But for me, JPEG works perfectly. So after that, I brought it into Lightroom. I'll go quickly through everything that I did here. So the exposure I kept the same because I properly exposed everything to my liking already in Photoshop. As for the contrast, I added a little bit of contrast on just to make it a little bit more kind of punchy. The highlights I did nothing with. The shadows I kind of brought out a little bit. My whites I brought up the tiniest little bit, but as for the blacks, I brought down significantly just to keep my blacks a little bit more true. Clarity, always be careful with clarity because too much can do way too much. But just dabble in it. If you want like a more like fairy effect or something a bit more dreamy, you can bring it completely down and it just reduces everything. My favorite thing to do in Lightroom, which I did not do here, is desaturating by a little bit and then making up for it by turning up the vibrance a little bit. It kind of punches the colors out that aren't really too prominent in your edit, and it'll bring down the saturation on the stuff that is a bit too prominent in your edit. But we are just going to keep it the same. As for the tone curves, I just kept it very simple. Whenever I work in tone curves or in curves in Photoshop, I will always make 3 dots just to work with. It's a simple S-curve. If you don't know what an S-curve is, it's just where you bring up your highlights and your shadows down. I also crushed my my shadows a little bit by bringing them up, but not too much to the point where they would look like that. HSL sliders, color, all that is my absolute favorite thing to mess around with. So the reds, I knew already that I wanted a red image, so I already just went across there. Orange and yellows kind of go hand in hand. If you want a red image, you're going to want to kind of tweak those a little bit. As for green, aqua, blue, if you want more of a blue image, you want to tweak those a little bit. I already had blue in my shadows, so I just kind of made those a little bit more prominent and tweaked them a little bit. Again, I do not recommend going all the way over unless you're going for that sort of effect. Keep it simple, keep it minimal, and it's easier. As for split toning is a fantastic thing to get into. If you press Alt and you press on any one of these hue slides, it gives you a very dramatic representation of what you're going to be getting, and then as soon as I let go of Alt, it just gets rid of it. So that's just so you can figure out what colors you're trying to go for. Like say I was going for blue, chances are I'm not going to find blue right away just scrolling through this unless I just scroll right over, but if I want to fine tone it, I can press Alt and blue's right there, and then I have it. Detail, the biggest thing that I've learned in detail lately is if you boost up your sharpening to max and you turn masking all the way up to mask 2 or up to 100 as well, it will bring out the sharpness in everything that's in focus, and it won't sharpen anything out of focus. For this image, I didn't do it. Some images I do, some images I don't. I've mostly been doing it lately because I feel like it brings a little bit more clarity into it without actually using the clarity slider and bringing too much clarity into it. As for noise reduction, I didn't do any of that because it's a stock image. Someone has a better camera than me, so it worked out better. And camera calibration is one of the best things that I use in this program. So already right there, that's a big difference. So it went more blue and yellow. So if you're going for that effect, cool. I wasn't at this time. I wanted it to be a bit more red. So sliding it to the left is going to give you a more red and teal look that a lot of people have been using on Instagram over the past years. Whereas bringing it to the right is going to give you a more yellow and like kind of greenish blue look. Again, you can always mess around with the saturation sliders. In this case, I did max it out because I knew exactly what I wanted. Same with the saturation on the green primary. If you bring it over, you kind of get like the same effect as if you were to bring it to the right on the blue slider. Instead, I just brought it mostly over to there because I knew the effect that I wanted to get. As for the red, I felt like maybe having a bit too much red was a little bit overkill, so I did desaturate it just a little bit, but not too much. As for the shadows, I didn't even mess around with that. I was pretty happy by the time I got to the end of it. And then, you know the rest. Export, save, upload to Instagram. If this helps you out in any way, please hit that like button. It helps me out so much as I am a new account. Subscribing would help me out a lot too. We're just about to hit almost 20, which I mean isn't giant, but it's a little bit of a milestone for me considering I just made the account. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me. Feel free to hit me up on Instagram at Quartz. If you have any questions, I can help you out to the best of my ability, but I will not edit the whole image for you, obviously. If Twitter's your forte, it's the same at Quartz. And if you want to hit me up on YouTube or email, my email is also on my YouTube. You can do so as well there. I'm mostly active on Instagram, so again at Quartz. Otherwise, tag me in your stuff. I would love to see what you guys come up with. And yeah. So have a good one. Happy creating, and I will see you guys soon, hopefully.